13 speaks of the greatest gift. It says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become a sounding brass and a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I can remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long, and it's kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. Is not puffed up. Does not behave rudely. Does not seek its own. Is not provoked. Thinks no evil. Does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never fails. As we gather around the throne of grace and thank God for another day and a chance to get things right, let us remember the season. This is a time of the year when we as Bahamians come together as a people to celebrate. When we not only celebrate our independence as a nation, but when we celebrate each other and each other's accomplishments and achievements as Bahamians and as a people of the Commonwealth that is the Bahamas. And despite our differences, let us recognize that there is so much more that is in us that we have in common, that brings us together and that binds us together. And one of these things is inherent in each and every one of us, and that is love. Today, we have all come through many hard trials, but we are still here. And we have each other. And we need each other. So I ask, as we move towards the throne of grace, that we get back to who we are as Bahamians, people of love, and that we show this understanding, not just in our words, but in our actions towards each other as we repeat the Lord's Prayer.
Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Attorney Webb, Brandon Simonette, Catherine Ballinger, Brendan Bell, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dr. James Sam, Marvin James, Frankie Campbell, Alicia Aguilar, Michael Pintard, Darren Henfield, Ramal Ferreira, Delisha Rose, Renzo Rose, Ellsworth Johnson, Philip Davis, Vaughn Miller, Keisha Parker Edson, Aaron Lewis, Carlton Bolag, James Albert, Travis Robertson, Adrian Gibson, Donald Saunders, Frederick McElpine, Hank Johnson, Mark Hume, Michael Pope, Miriam Rector Emmanuel, Reese Chipman, Ruben Ramming, Ricky Mackey, Shannon Don Cartwright, Danielle Ferguson, Lennis Hannah Martin, Price O'Ford, Chester Cooper.
Honorable members, I want to first of all thank the member for Port Charlotte, who, in my estimation, has been doing an exceptional job during this time of the year with our independence celebrations. I want to thank him for bringing to our attention this morning the most important word that God has given us. As a matter of fact, God described himself as love. God is love. And that is the foundation that we all should build upon. Thank you, Honorable Member, for Charlotte. Honorable members, before we proceed, I have a number of reports from the Auditor General that I wish to table at this time. The first report being an audit report on the examination of the Office of the Judiciary Magistrates Court for the period July 1st, 2016 to December 31st, 2019. Order that the document do lie on the table. The second document is an audit report, operations review report of the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services for the period July 1st, 2014 to June 30th, 2019. Order that the document will now lie on the table. A report of the audit review of the Post Office San Salvador for the period July 2018 to January 2020. An audit report for San Salvador and Ramkey districts for the period July 2018 to January 2020. And the final report, a special report, fire at the Administrators Complex, San Salvador, dated January 17th, 2020. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Amendments Order 2020.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document will lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following, and I wish to read it into the record. On behalf of the Senate,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, it's a letter addressed to the leader of government business in the Senate from the clerk of the House. The letter reads, Dear Senator Bethel, sometime after the meeting in the Senate on July 3rd, 2020, I received an inquiry from the opposition leader in the Senate as to whether or not the proclamation and its associated documents had been tabled by the Attorney General. I replied that according to my recollection, they had not been tabled. I have now had the opportunity to review my files of the documents bearing the signature of the Attorney General dated July 3rd, 2020, as well as the film and audio footage of the meeting of July 3rd, 2020, in response to the Governor General's proclamation summoning the Senate. I am now satisfied that the proclamation of emergency by the Governor General dated June 29, 2020, and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Regulations 2020, signed by the Governor General, were properly tabled by the Attorney General on July 3, 2020, as required by the Constitution and law. My files, along with the minutes of the meeting, the film and audio footage, are the true and correct record of the Senate. Yours truly, David L. Forbes, Clerk of the Parliament. I now table it, Mr.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Environmental Protection, Control of Plastic Pollutions Regulations 2020, on behalf of the Minister for the Environment.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further laying of documents.
Statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for South Beach.
May it please the Honorable Speaker, rise in the name of God, who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and wish, with your leave, sir, to extend to all of our beloved brothers and sisters of the Bahama land a blessed anniversary on our national natal day of some 47 years. And I send a special celebratory greeting to our beloved family in the South Beach constituency. Honorable Sir, I wish today to clarify, for the benefit of this honorable House and the Bahamian people, the financial status of the University of the Bahamas that has been the subject of some media reports with regard to a reduction in its budget. I wish to state, sir, that the overall support of the University of the Bahamas has increased some $10 million since coming to office in 2017, and that the number of students, mostly full-time students attending that university, has increased. And let me prove it. The budget year 2018-19, UB received a total of $38,559,074. At that time, it serviced approximately 4,800 students. 2019-20, it received a budget of $30,744,000 for its operational support. Additionally, it received $17 million as a scholarship grant for eligible qualified university students. In this budget year, 2021, UB will again receive the same amount as last budget year, $30,774,000, and will have an increase of $1.5 million for its tuition grant support, for a total of $18.5 million, bringing the overall total to some $49.2 million, some $11 million higher than its highest peak in its history, Mr. Speaker. I can stop here, Mr. Speaker, but let me continue. Like every Bahamian government department and every other household and institution and government on this planet, adjustments had to be made because of the new realities that confront humanity. However, these global adjustments, certainly in our particular circumstance, largely spared the most essential services in this country, the education and training of our people, young and old alike. That is why additional sums are being expended to pay those administering the upcoming national exams, which begin July 13, 5 days from now. That is why sums have been increased at BTVI to expand its capability and its technical offerings for now nearly 6,000 Bahamian students. That's a place to clap. That is why $11 million this year, twice the budgeted amount last year, is targeted to conclude the digitization process of the educational system in the Bahamas. The first product of which was the prescient launch last September of the Caribbean's first virtual school. It's another place to clap. Prescient, sir, from the Latin root word praescire, means to come to know beforehand. My beloved Cat Island honorable member knows Latin also well. We were both studying it concurrently at the same time. Because were it not for that school, sir, tens of thousands of Bahamian students would have been without educational instruction following Hurricane Dorian, and most particularly during this present COVID experience. Tens of thousands. In spite of these unforeseen challenges, this government continued to invest in the young and not so young minds of this country. May I also inform this honorable House that in 2016-17, a budget total of $30 million was earmarked by the former administration for the then COB/UB. Today, stated earlier, Mr. Speaker, the total receipt from the Bahamian people for the Bahamian people through the University of the Bahamas is $49.2 million. May I advise, sir, that this year, for the first time in its history, the University of the Bahamas, because of circumstances that now circulate across the globe, in particular the United States of America, where a number of our Bahamian students, totaling the hundreds, would have previously gone for the extension of their educational experience, and many of who are now refusing to go back because of the pandemic circumstances in the United States. It is anticipated, according to the officials at the University of the Bahamas, that the enrollment in the university this fall will exceed 6,000 students. Mr. Speaker, for the record, in the fall of 2015, it was 4,800 students. 16, it dropped to 4,500 students. 17, it increased to 4,669 students. 18, 4,400 students. Last year, 4,671 students. And it is anticipated that this year, 6,072 students will be enrolled at the University of the Bahamas.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Further statements and communications by ministers. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just making some changes and taking off my shoes. So
Honorable Member, just a moment. Order that the document be brought up from the Minister of Education, the Honorable Member for South Beach.
You know, my great, I know, you know.
Order that the document do lie on the table. The chair now recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this past Sunday, I was pleased to witness the signing of the Hippocratic Oath by new physicians here at home who will serve our country for many, many years to come. The ceremony, Mr. Speaker, was special to me as a father because one of my sons took the oath which medical doctors have sworn for centuries. So, as a father, I want to publicly congratulate him. He don't like me to call his name, so I won't call his name. He's very humble and low-key. The Hippocratic Oath is an ethical oath historically taken by physicians. And it is a rite of passage for new medical doctors, Mr. Speaker. The oath is attributed to an ancient Greek physician and has various versions. One part of the oath, which I wish to paraphrase, is as follows. I quote, "I will prevent disease whenever I can, for prevention is preferable to cure." Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that I repeat that, because as I speak, individuals will understand why the Hippocratic Oath that physicians take and the practice of medicine is so important. Taking a quote from such oath, being paraphrased, "I will prevent disease whenever I can, for prevention is preferable to cure." This has been a guiding light for me, Mr. Speaker, and the people's government during the COVID-19 pandemic. And because of this oath, and because of the oath of office I took to serve the Bahamian people, my first and most solemn obligation as Prime Minister, as Minister of Health, and as a medical doctor is to protect and to save lives. While others may play partisan political games, my focus is on saving lives. Because of our tough actions and decisions, we have prevented many Bahamians and residents from catching COVID-19 and getting sick and subsequently demising or dying. We have arrested community spread, but such community spread can quickly reemerge if we don't continue to act decisively and strategically. And just because we have no new, well, Mr. Speaker, I should change that. But just because we had not seen any new confirmed cases for a while, it does not mean that COVID has gone away from the Bahamas. The spread and containment of this virus is in all of our hands, Mr. Speaker. It's not my hand, but each and every individual in the Bahamas has a responsibility. Each must be disciplined, and each must be responsible. As any degree of irresponsibility can have serious consequences. We must be individually and socially responsible. And this is why I have continued to stress that if necessary, the government will reimpose various restrictions if warranted. We had stopped the spread of COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, I want to repeat. I want them to listen carefully. The adjective or verb that I use. We had stopped the spread of COVID-19. But the virus has not been eliminated and may spread widely and quickly again based on our individual and collective behavior. Mr. Speaker, today we are debating a resolution to extend certain emergency orders to protect the health of the Bahamian people. I quote directly from the resolution before the House of Assembly. And whereas, having regard to the continuing proliferation of confirmed cases in neighboring jurisdictions and active cases in the Bahamas, and whereas, due to economic necessity, the Bahamas reopened the national economy, including the entry of visitors coming from places in which there may be extensive community spread of COVID-19, which poses great risk to the public health of the Bahamas. And whereas the state of public emergency in the Bahamas continues, and whereas it continues to be necessary and expedient for securing the public safety, the defense of the Bahamas, the maintenance of public order, the suppression of mutiny, rebellion, and riot, and for maintaining supplies and services essential to the life and well-being of the community, to continue and enforce the proclamation, Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Regulations 2020, Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Order 2020, and Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Order 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House A, approves the continuance of the proclamation made on the 29th day of June 2020 until the 21st day of July 2020, and B, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Regulations 2020 made on the 29th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. And C, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Order 2020 made on the 30th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. And D, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Order 2020 made on the 30th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. Mr. Speaker, I wish at this time to advise the House of the most recent information from health officials as of today, July the 8th, 2020. The total number of confirmed cases in the Bahamas stood up to yesterday at 104, and it has now moved to 106. 2 additional cases was confirmed in Grand Bahama this morning, and 1 case is equivocal and waiting for confirmation at this particular time. Grand Bahama. So, Mr. Speaker, thus far, There's been 2 new reported cases since the 14th of June. That's in Grand Bahama. And health officials will release details in their regular update. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that health officials at this time are in Grand Bahama doing their surveillance and at the same time are investigating any forms of contact or possible spread, Mr. Speaker. 82 of the total number of cases originated in New Providence. In Grand Bahama, as of today, 10 originated in Grand Bahama. And our team is aggressively on the ground doing their contact surveillance, ensuring any type of travel, be those individuals, be any contact may have traveled just within Grand Bahama or to Nassau, Paradise Island, Atoll Island, what that other island that they like go swimming? Rose Island. Rose, I was even speaking, my dad used to swim in Big Pond in the ditch. I don't know. I don't know about those. You know, it's amazing. It's amazing. I can just describe. Yeah, you know, Jeff knows. The member for South Beach knows. It's amazing. As a little boy, we used to swim in the ditch. That's where we learned to swim. And then, as we improved, we used to walk the long walk and swim long walk. But in the ditch, there was always a coat of some element on the water. We just thought it was oil, and we just used to brush it aside. And as I grew older today and understand the environment, I now, Jeff, realized that we were swimming in the element, We were swimming in the oil, the discarded oil from BPL, BEC at that time. Yes, that's where they dumped the discarded oil in the ditch. That was the ditch. But we didn't know at that time. So we swam in that and we just used to brush it aside. So, Mr. Speaker, so I must have great resistance, both the member for South Beach and I. I've been swimming, I've been learned to swim in petroleum-infested waters, oil-infested waters. But now as I grew, I understood that I was swimming among a serious contaminated pool. But 10 are in Grand Bahama, 3 in Bimini, and 1 in Cat Key. There are 89 recovered cases, 4 active cases, and 11 COVID-19 related deaths. Currently, there are no hospitalized cases, and a total of 2,467 tests have been completed. Mr. Speaker, more than 500,000 people have died thus far during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the death toll continues to rise, even among our young people. And as I progress in what I have to say today, I will send a special message out to the young people. So those young people who are not yet listening to me, I would advise them to send messages out to all you can find so that I would send the relevant message to them so that they would understand the possible risk that they take should they become infected. Some medical experts, Mr. Speaker, are wondering about the long-term effects of this deadly and dangerous virus, which is very contagious. The virus is spreading at an alarming rate in various parts of our Western Hemisphere, including in neighboring countries. And I again warn Bahamians that the pandemic is not yet over. The global health emergency will likely not end until a vaccine is discovered. Countries and territories are trying to navigate between opening up to allow people to make a living, to take care of themselves, while at the same time keeping in place certain restrictions to slow the spread of the virus. This is an ongoing balancing act requiring agility and quick action based on the best available information at the time from public health experts. We are trying, Mr. Speaker, to do two critical things at the same time. We're trying to protect lives and livelihoods. And we have to do both at the same time. It is not either or, it is both. And we must strike that balance of the economy, that balance of life. And the members who are familiar with finance would know very well that we import a lot of our food, our oils, etc., require foreign reserves. And if we're locked down and nothing coming in, our foreign reserves would become compromised at some point in time. And our dollar remains stable on parity with the US based on one component, our foreign reserves, which means if our foreign reserves be locked down, our foreign reserves continue to deteriorate, our parity is compromised, and Bahamians won't be able to visit the US or others because their dollar won't worth anything. So one has to strike that balance. Then if you open too soon, then you run into the problem that other countries are experiencing now. You must now lock down. So, Mr. Speaker, you understand the complexity that one experienced. It's new frontier. When Columbus sailed and others sailed, they thought they were gonna fall over the cliff. They didn't know the world was round. We don't know what to expect tomorrow, but we do know that each and every country is observing and monitoring the others. And what works here, we try. But everything remains fluid. We don't know the solution. Nobody knows. Places that opened too fast, Mr. Speaker, and that did not follow proper public health guidance are experiencing a resurgence of the virus. And we see it throughout the world. Some healthcare systems are on the verge of collapse. This is something we have prevented thus far in the Bahamas. In some countries and states within some countries, the resurgence has been extraordinary. This has caused the imposition of restrictions, including lockdowns and the closure of establishments which were allowed to open. Speaker, I listened the other day. When we opened our restaurants, we started with 50%. We allowed 50% occupancy. Some countries started at 75. They are now reducing to 50. Maybe 50 was the magic word, we didn't know, but they are reducing to 50%. Bars and other facilities that were open are being locked down. So they are turning back the clock, Mr. Speaker. The Bahamas has been a model nation so far in our handling of the pandemic because we locked down early and are now trying to gradually reopen. We are being widely praised internationally, news which has apparently not reached some quarters, including the opposition, which seems to be deaf and blind to any news that does not suit their agenda. Mr. Speaker, the government took the crisis seriously from the beginning. We imposed restrictions early and moved to closures, physical distancing, mask, curfew, and lockdown. Though these quick measures were criticized by some, together, we stopped the virus in the Bahamas during the first wave. And during this pandemic, we have not made decisions in order to ponder and to posture for the personal political gain. We want our people, Mr. Speaker, to live. I made a statement when we were really in the pandemic. I made a statement not as Minister of Health at that time. I made a statement at one of the Ministry of Health's press conference, and I said, yes, Bahamian people want to live. And I said very dramatically that I too want to live. We all want to live, Mr. Speaker, but we all have a responsibility. And we must all do our part. One individual goes viral. He or she can contaminate and infect thousands within our society and cause a meltdown of our society. So each individual is just as important as the other. And each individual must remain disciplined. Speaker, I understand businesses and whatever. And you know, I was saying to one of my friends this morning while exercising at 5:15, we did not go out during the curfew, 5:15. I said to him, boy, I would not want to be in business at this time. You had to bring in all sorts of computer systems and digital systems to deal with that, reporting systems and mechanisms. Then you have to deal with COVID. You have staff and other things to deal with. I said, business must be extremely stressful. My one saving grace is I am no longer in business. I am now on cruise control. Everything I have will be given to others. Allow me just to continue to cruise to the twilight of my years and look to my retirement home and just comfort. Right, Travis?
7 years.
Mr. Speaker, I want our people to be healthy and safe. We want our economy and society to reopen as safely as possible in order to get thousands of Bahamians back to work as quickly and as safely as possible. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of the curfew, lockdown, and phased reopening of the economy is to minimize the risk of spread within the economy. At the beginning of the COVID-19 surge in the Bahamas, a lockdown was implemented based on the advice of the health officials. This was done to change the trajectory of COVID-19 cases. The lockdown resulted in a change in the rate of new cases daily. At one point, health officials were expecting as many as 90 cases within a week. But because of the lockdown, there were fewer than expected cases. I am also pleased, Mr. Speaker, to report that health officials have been able to contact trace every confirmed case of COVID-19 here in the Bahamas. But I want to remind you that there were 2 additional cases in Grand Bahama confirmed, and therefore health officials are aggressively pursuing any form of contact with those individuals, while 1 additional case remains equivocal. There's a possibility that we may move from 2 to 3. Contact tracing must be done. Mr. Speaker, even as we are battling COVID-19 on the health front, we developed a plan for the phased reopening of the economy. We put in place unprecedented plans before and in the national budget to address the health, economic, and social aspects of this pandemic. I appointed an economic recovery committee, which is preparing bold plans and ideas to help get our economy moving and get more Bahamians back to work. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused the worst downturn and recession in our lifetime. The worst, Mr. Speaker. We have had to gradually open up so that people could try to make a living, to take care of themselves and to take care of their families. We have done so while maintaining our core public health message and policies of physical distancing, mask wearing, hand washing, and sanitization. If we remain disciplined with these practices, the Bahamas may remain one of the model nations responding to pandemic. In order to stay ahead of this deadly virus, Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to take necessary preventative measures. Because our borders are now open, there's more risk of importing the virus from overseas. I repeat, our borders are now open, and we run the risk of importing the virus from overseas. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to remind them that there's a balanced economy and a balance of life. We must find that balance. There will be screaming on both sides. There'll be economic screaming, and there'll be life screaming. But there must be a balance. The reason we must take certain preventative measures, Mr. Speaker, is because we want to avoid problems before they happen and not just react to them. It's always better to prevent as opposed to reacting. When you're reacting, you're catching up. You're more prone to make mistakes. In terms of prevention, you can plan properly. You can anticipate what may possibly happen and make provisions and plans to deal with what may occur. That is why, Mr. Speaker, beaches and parks are to be closed in New Providence, Arthur Island, Rose Island, Paradise Island, Grand Bahama, and other keys surrounding New Providence over the 10th of July holiday weekend. Jeff, I guess you and I could still go in the ditch. Big point. They close Big Pond? Yeah. Oh my God, I think I can swim now. Mr. Speaker, this is being done out of an abundance of caution. This is being this is being done, Mr. Speaker, because prevention is better than cure. And during holiday weekends, there is a natural tendency for people to have mass gathering on beaches and parks. Mr. Speaker, I would urge my colleagues to review what's happened around the world with respect to beaches and parks and review the possible outcome or what have happened in terms of the introduction of virus within those facilities and subsequently throughout communities. These are printed throughout the world in all media, and I ask that we review the statistics. Mr. Speaker, such mass gatherings are where there can be super spreading of COVID-19. Allow me to repeat, super spreading. These are individuals who are asymptomatic, normal, can be in here, normal, no problem, but they're shedding the virus. Those individuals who had returned from Florida within 72 hours. I understand about 172 of them. They walked into the hotspot and came home. I'm not saying they're infected because we follow protocols and try to adhere as much as possible. But should one of them become infected, they can shed the virus outside of the incubation period, outside of the 14 days. We say they show symptoms at the 14th day. But during that time, they can shed the virus. 3rd day, 5th day, and infect all of us, yet they're normal. Mr. Speaker, we cannot take this risk. While many Bahamians continue to act responsibly and to observe health measures, there are some who are acting quite irresponsibly and with little to no regard for the health and well-being of others. Hundreds and hundreds of people in close contact with each other could quickly spread this virus, which is very, very easy to catch. And as a government, we want to prevent what Bahamians are seeing on the news every day in countries around the world. There are places where the hospitals are now full. The intensive care units are now full. They need more doctors and nurses. They help treat all the COVID-19 sick patients. And we all know the first wave internationally, from the first wave internationally, when sick patients overwhelm hospital systems, more people die. Mr. Speaker, should we have an outbreak, surge, our healthcare system can go on a meltdown. The member for Angleton said we can be in trouble, and I agree with her. The member from Angleton, her daughter is the lead personnel in testing and supplying us with the information for COVID. And our daughter is doing an excellent job, Mr. Speaker, Indira Martin. What does this mean when we go on a meltdown? It means that you will have no beds for sick patients because your hospital is being utilized by all COVID patients. It means that all elective cases are canceled and you have great difficulty even performing emergency cases. It means, Mr. Speaker, that our routine maternity cases cannot be cared for properly, and babies can be born at home or wherever because our hospital is in a meltdown. It also means, Mr. Speaker, that our children, our kids who need hospitalization for care, there'd be no facility for them. It also means, Mr. Speaker, that your routine cuts and bruises and headaches, you would have no such facilities to be treated. You'd be back to the Stone Ages. But, Mr. Speaker, what it also means is that doctors, as in some parts of the world, I don't want to call specific countries, doctors would then have to make decision that all 80-odd-year-olds be allowed to die because you're using the beds for the young people. Then you allow the 70-year-old to die. Then the 60s. Those are decisions that physicians would have to make should we have a meltdown, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it's essential that we make difficult and hard decisions now so as to save our future. Mr. Speaker, we have not had a meltdown. We've had a limited number of cases, and our facilities were used to manage the COVID cases that we've had. But in spite of that, Mr. Speaker, because we were so overwhelmed and dealing with the COVID cases, our immunization numbers had subsequently decreased. What it means is that the percentage rate that we were immunizing our population has now decreased because we were so focused with dealing with COVID-19. We've not had a meltdown, but our rates have deteriorated. What it means, Mr. Speaker, is that now we are predisposed to a high incidence of mumps, just from the little that we've had today. So imagine what happens if we have a meltdown. We're at greater risk for measles. We're at greater risk for rubella. And Mr. Speaker, what it also means is because we're at greater risk of rubella, our young people who become pregnant would be at greater risk of having abnormal infants. That's what we have today. And we don't have a meltdown. So do we allow a meltdown to occur, Mr. Speaker? Should it happen, those who visit our shores will no longer visit. Everybody would run. Not only that, mumps, rubella, and measles, and polio that we now would now be exposed to because our immunization rates have deteriorated. These must be reported to the World Health Organization. And once they are reported to the World Health Organization, Mr. Speaker, the entire world knows that your immunization rates are not up to what they should be. And you are at risk for mumps, rubella, polio, and others. Individuals would not travel to your country. Mr. Speaker, should we allow this to happen in our country, or do we be aggressive? So as we speak today, the health team are meeting and discussing an aggressive plan, utilizing whatever clinics that we have available, an aggressive plan to use social media and other whatever communication source we have to ask our people and our infants to come in so that they can get the necessary immunization, because we don't want to go down that road. And we don't have a meltdown. We've only had a number of COVID cases, but our immunization rates have decreased because we were focused on COVID. But if we have a meltdown, oh, Jesus Christ, God help us. God help us. I understand people's disappointment, Mr. Speaker. I understand people's disappointment. of not being able to go to the beach on the holiday weekend. And I want to remind them that I too was young and would have loved to go on the beach. I liked to go on the beach, but as I said, I had access to the ditch and subsequently long walk. But I asked the young people today, I asked them, we're only asking you to sacrifice 3 days. 3 days for a healthier and better nation. I'm asking you to sacrifice 3 days because those 3 days can save your children should you become pregnant. Would you want an infant to be born blind, with cataracts? These are the problems we face, Mr. Speaker, with our immunization rates deteriorating. Would you want your infants to be born blind? You want them to be born with cardiac abnormality, with the heart on the wrong side of the chest. The heart is here. You want your heart here. Abnormal vessels. 3 days is all I ask. Make it 3 days. I'm only asking the Bahamian population, do we not wait 3 days to save a nation? That's all I ask. 3 days. Be responsible. If you love yourself, if you love your future generation, if you love your country, and I know the member for Cat Island loves this country. He speaks always of Cat Island especially. He loves his country. Angliston speaks all about Angliston. So I ask the entire nation, Mr. Speaker, including our visitors, 3 days. That's all we ask. 3 days to save this little nation. We just had 2 additional cases. We don't know where they traveled. We don't know. We're investigating them now. Our decisions to speak out for the protection of Bahamians, residents, and visitors to our shores. We have considered the representations made by our partners in the tourism sector. The decisions taken are being done so soberly. They were done so soberly, Mr. Speaker, and in conjunction with the health advisors to the government. To our visitors, I know that you've traveled to utilize and swim in our beaches. If you love this Bahamas, as you say you do, then I ask that you make the sacrifice with us. Mr. Speaker, we are advised by the health professionals. Our health advisors, the health professionals, have been extraordinary. They've been outstanding. They've been excellent. I say to the Bahamian people, you trusted the health professionals before. You trusted their decision. You trusted them up to this point. You spoke highly of them, both here and internationally. The world recognized them and spoke highly of them. I ask you, if you trusted them before and they brought you this far, trust them again. That's all I ask. Keep the faith. Trust them again. They want to go on the beaches too. But they are prepared to sacrifice their time for you. So again, I repeat, if you trusted the health professionals yesterday, I ask you to trust the health professionals today and tomorrow. They have no agenda. Their only agenda, Mr. Speaker, is to save lives and to keep us safe. They don't care about PLP or FNM. They only care about Bahamians. And they care about whoever visit our shores would enter a safe environment. That's their care. That's their training. So I ask the Bahamian people, trust them. And I ask you all to sacrifice 3 days for the good of our nation. Mr. Speaker, I know from long experience that some of the very same people, commentators and institutions who are criticizing the decision to close certain beaches and parks this coming weekend would be the very same people criticizing this government if we did not close these beaches and parks, resulting in the virus spread of COVID-19. But, Mr. Speaker, my conscience is clear and resolved. We are doing the right thing in this case to help prevent the spread of this virus. We do not want, Mr. Speaker, our hospitals and health facilities to melt down. We do not want our people to become ill, become sick, or die. And I watch the member from Centerville, and I see he's well clad in his mask. I can see he's smiling under there. And every time I talk about having to live, he shakes his head. He wants to live. Mr. Speaker, we do not want our young people to develop any illness later on in life. I say to the young people, and I want the young people to listen to me very carefully. As they go out, gather, and potentially catch the virus, they take the virus home. Their parents subsequently become infected and they die. Their grandparents would subsequently die. And I know they do not want that on their hands. Mr. Speaker, I remind young people that they are not immune to this deadly virus. I remind them that they cause others to get sick and possibly die. And if you love your parents and your grandparents, uncles, you must be disciplined and responsible. We all know, Mr. Speaker, that this virus kills. But what the medical community is learning is there are various serious side effects that may linger. We cannot yet say what all the effects are or when or if they will go away because it is early in the trajectory of this virus. There are concerns, Mr. Speaker. COVID-19 causes various types of long-term damage to the bodies of those who survive it. And this, I say especially to the young people. You may survive it today, but let's look at the possible outcome. Let's look at what can happen. We know today that they are high. You can develop what we call Guillain-Barré syndrome, a neurological disorder, some with paralysis. We know that that can happen. We also know that they can develop kidney failure, require dialysis. We know that. Young people. We also know that they can develop lung failure and subsequently require transplant. There are cases of that. We know. We also know that it can precipitate diabetes when they had no predisposition. We know that. These are facts. We also know that they can form microclots, little clots within the blood. We know that. I'm informing the young people what can happen. They're healthy, but we know these things can happen. What we also know, Mr. Speaker, is that during this infection, they can experience what we would call in medicine viremia. All that means is the virus enters the bloodstream and can spread everywhere. Now, we do not know today what may happen. You may not necessarily present until 10 years later. We don't know because we are still studying this disease. So once it hit the blood, it can go to the brain. So 10 years later, you may come up with dementia. We don't know. So when you imagine an 18-year-old today, 28-year-old, 10 years later, dementia. We don't know. But we know it goes into the blood, and we're studying the process. We also know when it goes to the blood, a young person may develop stroke. And depending on what part of the brain is affected and the response, other illness, paralysis, etc. Because it goes to the blood, Mr. Speaker, they can also develop what we call, and the member for Elizabeth would know it even better than I do, they can also develop what we call cardiomyopathy. So can you imagine a young man, 18 years today, who got infected, but he feels strong as ever. And 4 years, 5 years from the day he's on the basketball court playing ball, and he drops down dead, bounce, heart attack. Nobody knows, sudden death, bounce. Do you want our people to go through that, Mr. Speaker? These are things the young people must know. We are still studying. We don't know what's going to happen 4 or 5 years from the day, but we do know that we want you to be safe. Then it spreads to the lung because it's in the blood. It goes to the lung. Lung problems, failure, respiratory problems. Go to the kidney. The young person, 18 today, 4 years later, kidney failure on dialysis. We also know it goes, once it hits the blood, it goes to the bone, Mr. Speaker. Now, I know, sir, I know St. Anne's want to go on the beach, but I know he don't want to go on the beach now after I finish talking.
You don't know what I think, Paul. You don't want to be true.
Anyhow, the Speaker.
I'm convinced. I'm convinced.
It goes to the bone. To the bone marrow. The bone. We know today that it causes, and I won't use medical terms, I'll say basic. It causes a decrease in platelets, a certain element in the blood. But with that decrease, you get spontaneous bleeding. Just bleed. Brush your teeth, boom, you're bleeding. You're sitting down talking, boom, blood coming out your eye, blood coming out your skin. We know that the platelets drop. We've not seen that yet. But if the platelet drops, that's a possibility. The white blood cells, which is responsible, that's your army in the body to protect you. That protects you. As we walk throughout the environment, we are exposed to all sorts of bacteria. But the white blood cells protect us. We know that that level decrease. And therefore, there's a possibility that with the decrease, you must live now in some cocoon in a hooded environment because you cannot be exposed to any form of bacteria. So if you think you're locked down now, Jesus Christ, you're locked down in a tent. That's what it's about, Mr. Speaker. And you're worried about a beach? I asked for 3 days. 3 days. Even the member for St. Hans changed his mind. He'll give me 3 days.
Why you changed your mind?
Change my mind from what? From what? I am led by the health professionals. Mr. Speaker, I can go on and on once you talk about viremia. And once you talk about microclots, because microclots can obstruct certain vessels and result even in gangrene. You all know about diabetes where feet no longer receive blood supplies and subsequently drops off, or whatever else you want to call it. I can go on and on, but I would be going into my medical field, but I'm only basically telling them, you're healthy today, but we don't know. We're still studying, but we know certain things. I told you things that we know. We are working as a government, Mr. Speaker, and health team to do all we can to prevent this dangerous virus from spreading. Mr. Speaker, PLP would have been a disaster during the COVID-19. I didn't call your name. I did not call your name. I did not call your name. In fact,
You're like a double-minded man. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
This, as I understand it, is a communication. No, just a communication. We get resolution.
Member's correct. This is statement and communication.
Yeah, so
It should not be provocative. I agree.
And ought not to be laced with broadsides or controversial. And I invite you, Mr. Speaker, to so chastise and correct the Prime Minister.
You're not in charge.
Sorry, the member for Kalani.
You're in charge.
And likewise to ensure that he withdraws those remarks that are controversial and laced with political broadsides.
yeah, I accept what the members say, communication. Therefore, Speaker, I can wrap up my communication now because the next 10 minutes I'm going to slap up the member. And therefore, I would leave that until I reach the resolution. So, Mr. Speaker, I complete my communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. The portion that you finished. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville. On a point of order.
Just want
clarification.
Yeah, clarification on it. Clarification. Clarification. Thank you. The member for Kalani indicated that beaches and parks closed.
I can't hear the honorable member. Please raise your microphone and speak up, please.
Yeah, the member indicated that beaches and parks will be closed this weekend, and I just wanted to know if that includes private beaches, private parks. Okay, well,
the chair recognizes again the member for Centerville.
Mr. Speaker, there are some gated communities as well as homes that are on beaches, and so I'm just asking if all beaches, which means they would include private beaches as well as public beaches, and private parks may be parks within the gated communities or public parks. I just need clarification because I know why I'm asking.
Honorable members, there being no further statements and communication by ministers, we'll move on.
It's still not clear to me. I'm just asking, do you mean all beaches and all parks? Thank you.
Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, seat, and new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. Committee of the whole. Third reading and passing of bills. Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now brace. Brace yourself now.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the following resolution. Whereas pursuant to Article 29(1) of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency declaring that state of public emergency for the purposes of that article exists in the Bahamas. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House, A, approves the continuance of the proclamation made on the 29th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. B, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Regulations 2020, made on the 29th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. C, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Order 2020, made on the 30th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. And D, affirms the continuance and effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Order 2020, made on the 30th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. Mr. Speaker, as I commence my debate, I reaffirm, I state, the PLP would have been a disaster during the COVID-19. In fact, they are a disaster during this pandemic, even while in opposition. As reported in the Tribune yesterday, the leader of the opposition seemed to suggest that the decision to close certain beaches this holiday weekend appeared arbitrary and devoid of a scientific basis. He is wrong on both fronts. The decision was carefully and strategically taken based on medical science and based on what we have seen in other jurisdictions and the potential for super spreading of COVID-19 during this upcoming holiday weekend. Mr. Speaker, we can only look across our borders and see what is happening in Florida, what is happening in Texas, and even Arizona. And I would say, unlike them, we want to protect our people. This leads me to believe, Mr. Speaker, that were he in position to do so, he would allow these beaches and parks to remain open, possibly endangering the health and lives of Bahamian people. And sadly, tragically, the leader of the opposition continues to demonstrate an arbitrary, reckless, irresponsible, and unscientific posture to the threat of COVID-19. He can't seem to make up his mind, Mr. Speaker, whether the country is opening too quickly or not quickly enough. His pronouncements and posture seem to be based on putting his finger in the wind. And depending on how the wind blow it, that's the decision. If the wind blow it up, it's a decision. If it blow it down, it's a decision. It goes in the direction of that little wind. As for me and my government, Mr. Speaker, our decisions are based on medical science and medical facts. And the need to balance the health, social, and economic needs of the Bahamian people. This is a time for responsible, strong, and steady leadership, not pandering and posturing like the leader of the opposition. I say again, he and his party would have been a disaster during this time, an absolute and unmitigated disaster. Mr. Speaker, we must remain a cautious and disciplined people. We must maintain physical distancing, and we must keep wearing our mask. Gentlemen, what have you mask? We must keep wearing our mask. We must wash and sanitize our hands. And we should stay away from crowds. We must stay ahead of the virus, Mr. Speaker, and never allow it to get in front of us. If it gets in front of us, we know the problems we face. And our tourist industry will crash, not only because of the virus, because also of reporting the WHO in terms of our immunization status. We must protect the more vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas will press onward so that we can continue to move into a time of hope, triumph, and transformation, which is the theme for this year's Independence celebration. Thank you, Port Charlotte. I invite the Bahamian people, Mr. Speaker, to watch the virtual Independence celebration, which begins at 8 p.m. tomorrow night on July 9th on ZNS. And Mr. Speaker, in response to the unprecedented last 10 months following Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic, we have taken unprecedented action as a nation. And because of our actions and our Bahamian spirit, we will rise, Mr. Speaker. And as a phoenix, we will rise. The world continues to mark the manner of our bearing. But we must continue to do what is right so that the world can continue to see and to respect our bright banners waving high. We are, Mr. Speaker, resilient people. The essence of resilience is discipline. It's fortitude, and it's determination. We cannot slack off. We cannot rest. We cannot go weak because the virus is as aggressive and as deadly as ever. While we rest, if we rest, the virus will never rest. It will continue to traverse societies. Let us not put our shared sacrifices and the sacrifices of our healthcare professionals at risk. Let us remain alert, vigilant, and strong. May God bless our Bahamas as we celebrate. May God bless our Bahamas as we celebrate 47 years of a sovereign, proud, free, and resilient people. I wish the members of the House and the Bahamian people a happy and safe independence. Mr. Speaker, many people have asked, why do we lock down 10 p.m.? 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. And we asked for an extension. The question is asked, why? Mr. Speaker, we believe that during those times, there are mass gathering, parties, etc. That's most active times to our view. There's no scientific evidence at this point in time. And nobody would know until 5, 10 years from the day when they look back and they analyze how the Bahamas managed, how the US managed, how the UK managed. That's when the results would come out. Because today, we're all fluid. We're changing. But we're getting results. What they may find out that in other countries, their mass gathering may be at different times. And that would be appropriate for them, but not necessarily for us. But we won't know that today. But we feel, and I tried to obtain such information from the Statistics Department. They don't have such information. The police offered some, but that's not sufficient. But nobody can answer that question until 5-10 years from today, as we review how the various countries managed the COVID-19. But we feel 10 to 5 is the most active period within our setting. And that is demonstrated by Waterloo. That is demonstrated by the restaurants in the East, the restaurants in the West. Young people don't party before 8 o'clock. You know, Mr. Speaker, when I was in university, I would go to bed. At 8 o'clock. And then I get up at 11:30 because I'm not going to party until 12. I'm certain the young people do that today. That's the most active time. That was my most active time. So at 12 o'clock when I'm at the party and boogieing, they say, where he got all this energy from? Not knowing that I just woke up. So, Mr. Speaker, we believe that the 10 to 5 is the most active time, busy time, gathering. And therefore, we warn people about gathering. Gathering can be dangerous. We have in the order where we limit that. I know the police just recently closed down some place because there were 150 individuals. All you needed was one. One infection can cause a meltdown of an entire country. One. And then you know what they're going to say? Minister managed it bad. I get blamed because of him.
That's what they're reason for.
I'm home in my bed sleeping. The Speaker, so that's the reason. That's the reason. But nobody can say whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. Not today. But they can say that 10 years from today. Everything is fluid. But what we have done is working. Working. So 10 to 5. Probably working. It's probably the best. And other countries need to look at their most active periods and devise their formula around their most active periods. Mr. Speaker, there will be a lot of talks about young doctors that just finished. I could say that the young doctors, I think 35 of them, they had their interviews and whatever else for their matching. I can say that all 35 has been matched. So they would be employed. They've been matched. I'm talking about doctors right now. They've been matched. Then, Mr. Speaker, they'll also ask about the house officers as you move from intern to house officers. They're being assessed and determined at this time in terms of their employment. Princess Margaret has so much, Sandman's has so much, public health has so much. So they're going through that process at this particular time. So whatever questions you may have, I'll be able to answer after they go through the process. But they would be engaged. But I have more information, but this is not the time. Sometimes you throw fire on, somebody catch it, and spike them. And Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I so move this resolution.
Thank you. Is the seconder? The chair recognizes the honorable member The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Speaker, I rise to second this resolution. Mr. Speaker, rising here to second this resolution is somewhat bittersweet. I think that I know that we are a family in this honorable house, and as a Bahamian population, that means everybody within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. But during COVID-19, as I've told my colleagues, I've experienced almost every shade of emotion. The anger, sadness, happiness, disappointment, motivation, innovation, and most importantly, embracing this opportunity, because during this experience, Mr. Speaker, I've had the unfortunate experience of losing my sister. And so, Mr. Speaker, I do recall a husband who's differently able, who my sister assisted greatly, because earlier on in his life, he had an unfortunate accident where he lost the use of his limbs. Now he utilizes a wheelchair. And to hear him speak to me after her passing, he said that I have to conduct myself with sobriety and objectivity, because the country needs us all as we face three crises. There's the crisis of the climate crisis. We've seen a major part of our economic environment totally destroyed, persons left without home, COVID-19, and the economic crisis that the world is now faced with, having to deal with this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend Kalani for his contributions this morning and for his leadership during this time. I'm not going to be very long, but I shall seek to contextualize, Mr. Speaker, my contributions here today within the concept of the rule of law. And then I shall deal with the Article 29 of the Constitution. And then I should look briefly at the emergency powers provision and contextualize it in everything that we're presently experiencing, Mr. Speaker, and to say why we have to conduct ourselves, as my good brother says, with sobriety, objectivity, being deliberate as we be creative, because as we look around the world, just to the south of us, our neighbor to the north, Florida, and other states within the America, Italy, and a number of other places, we can see the extreme damage that has been wrought on those communities as a result of COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, anytime one of my mentors is watching, and she sent a text to me to ask me, what are you reading? I know she's smiling now. So I sent back to her, I said, the essays of judging, the business of judging, selected essays and speeches of Lord Tom Bingham, and Tom Bingham, The Rule of Law. With everything that we do, Mr. Speaker, no matter how we feel about it or our emotions, must be grounded within the construct of the rule of law. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would just like to read a portion from the 6th chapter on the rule of law, the exercise of power, and I'm going to contextualize it to what we are experiencing here today. Leaders inclusive of the competent authority in the context of what we are experiencing here, must exercise the powers conferred upon them in good faith, fairly, for the purpose for which the powers were conferred, without exceeding the limits of such powers, and not unreasonably. For although citizens of a democracy empower their respective institutions to make laws which, duly made, bind all of whom they apply, and it falls to the executive or the competent authority, the government of the day, and its servant, to carry these laws into effect, nothing ordinarily authorizes the executive to act otherwise than in the strict accordance with those laws. And so, Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the Constitution and those provisions that focuses on the fundamental rights. And last night I read them through again to look at Article 29 because we're in serious times. And I know that not just this side, but the side opposite fully appreciates the sensitivity and the objectivity we must bring to matters when they affect the fundamental rights of everybody. And Article 29 basically said, and what I want to highlight from Article 29, because there's only two times we can conduct ourselves the way that we're conducting ourselves, and that is in the time of war, and the time when we, as a collective, decide that there is a state of emergency. And I need not say or find the legislation which grounds us in a state of emergency, because we know that the World Health Organization, PAHO, and all the medical professionals would confirm, inclusive of the side opposite, that we are in a state of emergency. That we're in a state of emergency. And Mr. Speaker, the Constitution requires us in these times to act for the things that we do, inclusive of the government general, that they must be reasonably justifiable. So here we are, where borders have been closed, you could not travel, you had to shelter in. There were any number of persons in the community communicating with the Immigration Department. I want to thank them, and I'll thank them again. We had to speak to the competent authority about making provisions in an order to protect those persons who could not travel, whose applications before the Immigration Department had expired. And so there was an order to automatically extend them, to allow them to have the safety and feel the security that our citizens were feeling around the world, who were sheltered in, whether it be in America, Australia, or Europe. And so we had to do that. Mr. Speaker, grounding my presentation, as I said, in the law as I see it, I trust that it finds favor in the law. We are being led, Mr. Speaker, in this pandemic by a phenomenal lady. And the former Attorney General of the Office of the Attorney General, Mrs. Allison Maillard Gibson, describes her as the leader of the strategy. Leader of the strategy is supported, as I look to the committee that was established by the competent authority, is supported by any number of competent, young, brilliant, articulate, intelligent, Bahamian professionals, inclusive of the granddaughter of Mr. Arthur Dion Hannah Sr., and the daughter of Angliston. His Excellency, I do apologize. Thank you very much. His Excellency, thank you. The police force. I want to commend some of my colleagues from J Squad who were recently promoted. The only two of us, I think, weren't promoted. That's myself and Oscar Maffey. No, I pretty much understand why I wasn't promoted. Oscar is still trying to figure out why he wasn't promoted. But I want to commend all of my squad mates on their recent promotions for their serving. Then you have those prison officers who we have not heard a mumbling word from, supporting the phenomenal ladies who I just spoke about, who Mrs. Allison Maynard Gibson described as the leader of the strategy in the person of Dr. Merslin Dal Regis, who was recognized by the World Health Organization and CAHO for her phenomenal work as dealing with infectious and/or contagious diseases, in particular with mothers, women, and children, in preventing the spread of HIV. And that phenomenal Bahamian lady, I do have a predisposition or bias. That black, beautiful, phenomenal Bahamian lady is doing a phenomenal job. She's being supported by police officers, prison officers, and when I say that, I'm thinking now about the COVID-19 committee, immigration officers, teachers, defense force, social workers, and all of whom are being supported by the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And I don't want you to think that we came this far because we did not have the support of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And Mrs. Gibson said we were able, in an international interview, that we were able to accomplish as a small country what we have accomplished, to the envy of many, because of the rapid and objective response by our government in putting in place strategic health measures, whether it be by the wearing of masks, social distancing, because we're learning as we go. And Kalani is correct. We're learning as we go. Social distancing, washing of your hands, not gathering in large groups, family members staying with family members, because we were able to exude that discipline, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to commend all of those persons who continue to work, who continue to utilize innovation and creativity to advance in these difficult times, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've seen the Bahamas in the context in which we find ourselves opening sensibly, and all around the world, countries are trying to find a way how they can open to do business. That is the reality. America realizes that she can no longer print money. It becomes worthless after a while. We've been able to keep on all of the public servants. None of them have been sent home. I've been a part of the experience, Mr. Speaker, where we have had to find hundreds of thousands of dollars to build clinics, to refurbish clinics, to see private individuals says we will do it for you, and to understand fully where we are financially in this country, to try to bring persons back to work in the most sensible way by saying that no persons can enter buildings without masks. And so these laws that we are applying, Mr. Speaker, and the reason why I went to the rule of law is because they touch and concern some of the most fundamental and crucial rights that we experience. Freedom of movement. It authorizes the power of arrest to take someone's liberty. And the emergency powers order Mr. Speaker, outlined some of those that the competent authority is allowed to deal with, and I'll just give you some. Now, one person's watching from home to take this all in the context that we are actually dealing with life or death. No matter what person say in here, and let me get real with you, you ain't gonna find none of them wanting to take you home. My wife ain't allowing me to bring nobody home. You ain't gonna find much in here who have the funds to pay for you to be hospitalized. Kalani already told you. Strategic decisions, he doesn't have to tell you. You could look in the US, in New York. They decided to wheel persons outside and decide who will die. This is the reality in which we live in. And it affects young and the old. And the laws, when they apply, affect the public and private. So, Mr. Speaker, these enactments allow for the competent authority to provide regulations or orders that are extremely powerful. Mr. Speaker, I know that the question has been raised as to whether or not there was a break in the emergency powers orders, which came to an end on the 29th of June. I think that matter is a non-issue. We know just before the order was had intended to expire, that the Governor General issued a new order, which was laid before this House, and we're now debating it. And so, Mr. Speaker, we're here today to speak to the reality of the situation, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to say, from my perspective, I want to commend Elizabeth for all that he has done and that he continues to do, and the Most Honorable Prime Minister. But it was never about Elizabeth or the Prime Minister. Because I do recall when we first started this process, the Most Honorable Prime Minister said, listen, you have to let the medical professionals lead. Allow them to lead the process. So Dr. Dalridis and a team, they were brought on. And they have led this process admirably. Mr. Speaker, I've sat in meetings and I would not condescend to those meetings. But I admire the strength of their team, led by Dr. Dalridis. I admire the scrutiny of the team. The team doesn't take cognizance of the gross domestic product. The team is laser focused in on saving lives. Laser focused in. And so when there are discussions or deliberations as to COVID-19 or how we deal with it, it's a comprehensive approach in accordance with the law that allows in these circumstances where there's an international and world pandemic for one to have emergency orders to activate Article 29(2) of the Constitution. And so I want to thank the supporting cast, and I don't think anybody in these circumstances would fault me for saying the supporting cast. The leader of the strategy is Dr. Dalridis and a team, supported by public and private persons. You could see, and I want to identify this when they have the interviews. Whenever there's a technical issue or problem or an issue that ought to be responded to by government, Dr. Dalridis says, come, Dr. San, or the Prime Minister will answer that. If there's an issue about infectious diseases, you see, and their names, I don't want to call their names right now, But you see that young man who always wear the bow tie? He comes to the table. Or those are the chief medical officer. He comes to the table. When it's the provision of clinic or supplies, the government has to answer that. So I think we've gotten lost in terms of who is really leading this. We have to continue to rely on the expert advice of the team that's leading us. And what is so fundamental to it, Mr. Speaker, is that the people that are called on to come out don't have the resources if they get ill. And that's why you have seen with the public education campaign that the former Attorney General spoke to, the nurses, the doctors saying, if you stay at home, you could save our lives. We saw it around the world where health professionals were getting ill. I'm so happy that I don't think we have a police officer who got ill. They come out in the night. They work extra hours. I know. I'm in a chat group. And some of them are some of my best friends. And they have children. The prison officers who are sometimes understaffed, work extremely hard, but you don't hear them complaining. And so my contribution, I want to bring it home to the persons who the nurses, the bus drivers or the taxi drivers who said this is the way how we make our living, but they went home. You didn't have to hear much from them, They withstood the pain. The teachers who worked along with the Minister of Education to transform education. And I think we need to see this in real terms, that there's great sacrifice being made. The hotel workers, hundreds of them, who are hoping, as we're doing, and I want to commend the Minister of Tourism and all who are supporting, trying to create an environment where, and this is the environment that everybody is trying to create now in tourism, that we are a safe jurisdiction, following all of the international protocols, where we can come, live, and work. And in the Immigration Department, we are fighting feverishly to bring into effect what my predecessor was doing, the digitization of the department. With the whole situation that's happening now in Hong Kong, there are hundreds of thousands of persons wanting to relocate. Canada and the UK is trying their best to take them. I had a conversation with a banker the other day, and he was saying, in the midst of COVID-19, we were discussing the whole value proposition of the Bahamas. The beauty, the serenity, most importantly, the people. And he says, the security. He says, you have one of the most powerful armies. He said, I don't mean to insult you, but you have one of the most powerful armies to the north. So the Bahamas is a good place to bring all the gold and storage. Nobody's going to come and take it. Because when you look at some areas of the world, whether it be Latin America and some other areas, there's upheaval. But I think we need to come to appreciate all that we have. I want to say to the aim is that everybody's looking to buy a piece of the pie in the Bahamas. Be very careful with the sale of your property. I want to commend this government. I'm going to stay on top. There's a white paper, a paper that in 2018 that I read from Mr. Speaker to look at the history of land reform in the Bahamas. All that has happened in Bosine Town and Finland Estate. The regentrification of the Department of Lands and Survey. The bringing in of surveyors to track all the land throughout the family island. I just want persons, and I'm going to put that up on my webpage and encourage the government to put it up to see what's happening. The approach to land registration in this country, and every time I speak about the ladies from Cat Island remembers that. How the land registry has to be significantly improved, and that is being done. Because, there was a time, and he knows these persons, he grew up in Old Bike. When they went to appeal their case, the files had gone missing. And so the Progressive Liberal Party, led by Oscar Johnson, passed a resolution to assist those old ladies. And so that work is ongoing. But in the midst of what we're experiencing pardon me? Leave had already been given, the file went missing, and so now it behooves us that this whole issue of digitizing government in a smart way has to happen. And that's why I always remember those things from Kerala. And I want to commend the Chief Justice that in the midst of COVID-19, he's digitizing the court system. And that's how we were able to move the passport. So, Mr. Speaker, I want the Bahamians to understand, especially young people. When I go jogging into South Beach, I saw some of them having a party. It could mean your mother, your father, your niece, your cousin, a police officer, all of these people who sacrifice. And I want to commend the court and the police officers. I've heard the discussion about them being unreasonable. We have talked. How many buckets of water do you need in one night? Let's be real. When the court gets something, and the Chief Justice said it, in one of his presentations, he said it in open court, that you don't demonize or threaten with imprisonment, denigrate judges for doing their work. And if you're dissatisfied with it, appeal it. They have the facts. A good member for Kalani spoke about one person in South Korea. One person came in, went to church, and it spread. I want to commend the church, Zion East and Shirley, for the work that they've done in following the protocol. I heard that one or two didn't do it, but especially the Anglican Church, social distancing and demanding that the protocols be followed. Faith without works is dead. You can't do something foolish and then expect a different result. One of the temptations that the master responded to is not to tempt God. Don't do silly things. So I want to commend the church for all the work that they've done in leading the way. But I want to re-emphasize, Mr. Speaker, that the reasoning for activating Article 29.2 is based in law, informed by expert authority, that we have one of the best that the world has to offer, that the Bahamas has to offer, leading these efforts, supported by some of the experts in the field, the doctors, the lawyers, the Prime Minister, the nurses, Dr. Sands. He still sends out everything every morning. The prison officers, the persons who clean the road, family members who support those officers when they have to go, prison officers who have to go to the island and work, leave their family. Immigration officers. This is as real as it gets. And I know we've gotten caught up in everything that TV has to show us. Everything is like a soap opera. But this is not soap opera. This is real life. I want persons to understand that it's not about the Prime Minister. This is not about the leader of the opposition. This is not about the Minister of Education or Social Services. It's not about Ellsworth Johnson. It's not about Mr. Kerala, Rumkey, and San Salvador. It's not about Dr. Sands. It's about the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and for us to preserve a country where people could live, work, and play, and about creating an environment. And we've been able to do that, where the world is saying, we want to come and live there. They're doing it. They're doing their risk assessment. They want to rebuild their homes. They want to build homes for us to make the right decision. But I want to thank the leader of the strategy and her team, and all who are supporting, all who are praying. And so, as we continue, and I think the beach, going to the beach on the weekend is just a small part of it. We're not out of the woods as yet. We're far from it. This I saw the other day where someone said it may be airborne. They're still doing research, trying to figure this out. This is like, I gave it after my sister passed. And I know all of us have had this experience where you get up in the middle of the night, you think somebody may be around your home and in your home, so you look in to see. This is an intruder that you can't see, but you know it's around. My good cousin on the end, he wipes down everything. The only thing he doesn't do is wipe his body down in here. But everything he comes in here and he wipes. He even wiped down the wipe. But he's taking the necessary precautions to ensure that he lives for his wife and for his children. And not only that he be on the front line, as my good brother-in-law told me. And I was really upset. I didn't know I was going to go to work. He said, well, you got to get up, gird your loins. It's about sobriety and objectivity and go and serve the country. And I was so embarrassed. Here's this man praying. And my sister used to literally lift him up, do everything, almost everything for him. And so I pray God continued blessings on this country. I know for me and my house, and I'm not being sexist, I wear the pants. I wear the pants. Like the fella say, my wife only wants me to wash the dishes with hot water. But I wear the pants. For me and my house, and for me and the house that extends from Dalcat Island, we're going to take all the necessary precautions to ensure that the directives coming from the strategic leader, that they're followed. I thank you, and I support this resolution.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas pursuant to Article 29, subsection 1 of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency declaring that a state of public emergency for the purpose of that article exists in the Bahamas. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House, A, approves the continuance of the proclamation made on the 29th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. B, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Regulations 2020 made on the 29th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. C, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Order 2020 made on the 30th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. And D, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Order 2020 made on the 30th day of June 2020 until the 31st day of July 2020. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me lay a basis here, a foundation. And I start by this, saying this. Everywhere I go in this country, our country, I meet Bahamians who are deeply worried about the present economic crisis. People worry, like I repeat this, people worry about how they are going to pay their rent or their mortgage. They worry about how they're going to keep the lights on, and they worry about how to put food on the table. Many Bahamians are watching their small businesses go under. Businesses that represent years of dreams and hard work. People are being laid off from their jobs. People are worried about how they are going to take care of themselves and their families. And so, many Bahamians tuned in to watch the Prime Minister give his national address 2 Sundays ago. And no doubt they tune in to listen to him here today. And they tune in because they had hope. They hoped that he would have offered some new strategies to alleviate the economic pain, which I can assure him is widespread across our islands. Unfortunately, they didn't hear any new ideas or plans to help them through the economic crisis. Today, for example, what we saw was a stoking of mass hysteria. We saw a stoking of fear-mongering. We heard about when this disease gets you, what could likely happen to you. But, Mr. Speaker, it has never been more important to have a leader who can face the Bahamian people, right, to protect them. Because, Mr. Speaker, we are here once again being asked by this government to extend a set of emergency orders after Bahamians have already been deprived of their fundamental rights and freedoms for over 3 months. For over 3 months. And now, laughably, they're saying, give me 3 days. Give me 3 days. I want to remind everyone here that the resulting emergency measures are the most extreme intrusion on civil liberties ever endured by the people of this country since independence. We supported the original proclamation of emergency in order to protect Bahamians. And the law empowers a body described as the competent authority to create such measures. During the course of that debate, in our support of it, I pointed out that it was good practice for such bodies to be comprised of a number of competent persons. But in this instance, the government decided that they wished to vest these powers entirely in one person, the Prime Minister. That means that the country has had to endure several months during which we have all been subject to the judgment of one man. Don't ask me that because I won't want to say our conversation. Because, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister had assured us, but because the Prime Minister had assured us that he relied on expert scientific medical advice in the exercise of his authority, and we supported him. And I could give at least 2 public incidents where measures were implemented, and the medical personnel didn't know anything about it and didn't know why those measures were implemented and what informed the competent authority to have implemented it. And that became public. So I don't know whether it's because the Prime Minister very often continues to remind us or to impress us with the phrase, as a medical doctor. That was to justify those actions. But as we have seen in other countries who don't have a medical doctor as a Prime Minister, That is not what is needed. What is needed is ministers who follow expert scientific advice. And we, along with a great number of our fellow citizens, have found that far too many of the decisions being made by the competent authority, the Prime Minister, defy medicine, science, and plain common sense. Take the matter of overnight curfew. The Prime Minister, well, spoke about it just now, recently modified the curfew. It began at 10 p.m., an hour later than was previously enforced. Many Bahamians took to the airwaves and social media to ridicule the decision. They wondered if the COVID-19 virus now comes out only at 9:59 p.m. and disappears again at 4:59 a.m. Surely the protective and physical distance measures and the other protocols that are sufficient during the day can also function in the dark. Let me say this. And as the Prime Minister, you have to have faith in your people. It's their cooperation, not your coercion, that is producing the results that we have. Have faith in your people. Your commentary today about what happens between 10 and 9, or 10 and 5, and how the Bahamians are basically irresponsible. That's what you're saying. We are an irresponsible lot. And that's why I have to put down this coercion thing. That's what I'm saying. You need to, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member. Chair. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani. Are you on a point of order, Kalani?
Yes, Speaker. Speaker, I only want to remind the member on numerous occasions, if you had listened to me, I would have thanked the Bahamian people for their discipline and their cooperation. Never have I said otherwise.
Speaker, from what the Prime Minister said here today, right? My opinion is because and they'll understand this. You are saying that young people in particular, after 10, they're going out at night. They don't go out until after late. And they are going to congregate. And they're going to, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is, Mr. Speaker, will you quiet the gallery? Quiet the gallery? Speaker, what I'm saying is that, listen to the argument. They can go, they're out during the day. They are out during the day. They are out during the day. They are observing the protocols that are in place during the day. Why do you believe they will not do so during the night? Have faith in your people. Have faith in your young people. Have faith in them. Right? All you need to do is the same way we are policing it during the day, police it during the night. That's the point we make, Mr. Speaker. That's why it's being ridiculed. That's why it's being ridiculed. And look, after his latest pronouncement, locking down the beaches for the holiday weekend.
Honorable members.
Bahamians mockingly wonder. Listen, Bahamians mockingly wonder if the virus only stalks the beaches during holiday weekend. Because Bahamians have been on the beach. Last weekend they were on the beach. They could be here. Mr. Speaker, the greater the infringement on civil liberties, the greater the responsibility of the Prime Minister to provide sound scientific justifications. It's difficult to legislate behavior, and for the Prime Minister to suggest the Bahamian people have been cooperating. And as I've indicated, it has, in my view, It's been cooperation, not coercion. And so we have in place protocol. Yes, you have masks. Yes, you have the washing of hands and the distancing. They can happen during the night as well. They can happen on the beach as well. I've seen over the weekend, I drove the beaches to see how it was being observed. And it appeared to me that they were in fact observing the protocols. They will do so on the weekends. The young people will do so at night. And just like you, Prime Minister, they don't want to die. Why you think you think they want to die too? Right? You don't want the Lord has my number, and when he calls it, I'm ready. He has my number, and when he calls it, I'm ready. But since, why do you believe you don't want to die, and you don't want to die, and the Bahamian people, you think they want to die? You have put in place measures to tell them, look, this is how you're going to save your life. You don't think they can follow that, Mr. Prime Minister? That's what I'm saying to you. Have faith in your people, have faith, particularly in your young people. See, when a government restricts the freedom of movement of its citizens, it had better have a good reason, right? The crisis for the country is that we have, I think, a competent authority who is not acting too competently. Prime Minister, don't make yourself the laughing stock, right, of the country. Don't make yourself a laughing stock. That's what's becoming. When people start to look at these measures, right? At this stage of the pandemic, because of what is apparent failure of leadership, the Bahamian people are left facing two terrifying consequences. The first is that as the borders have just been reopened, the government is not doing enough to protect Bahamians. Fear-mongering, and hysteria, as we heard here today, is not the answer. And the second is that the government is not prepared to shield Bahamians from the worst of the economic crisis. In both cases, the government's incompetence is dangerous. For the first time in 9 months, international visitors returned last week to the Bahamas. This was and look when it happened, just as the United States set a new daily record with over 50,000 new COVID-19 cases. The Americans' top infectious disease expert has recently indicated that the rate of new infections could soon double to 100,000 a day. While we understand the need to open the borders to get the economy moving again, it has to be done in ways that keep Bahamians safe. As we have said it several times in the past weeks, reopen, yes, but reopen wisely. Bahamians have, at truly great cost to themselves, through cooperation, not coercion, done their part to contain the virus in our own country. So you have acknowledged what they are owed by this government now is a plan to make sure all that has been gained will not be lost. The experts on the PLP task force have said from the start, we have said from the start that testing has to be at the center of any plan to keep Bahamians safe. That is especially true as we move to what the WHO has described as this more dangerous phase of the pandemic. We have moved now to the more dangerous phase of the pandemic. And guess what happens? The country reopens. That's why we have to be careful and wise. We must be clear about the risk we are facing. One Bahamian hotel employee can be infected by one visitor. And days before either experiences symptoms, the virus can begin to spread silently through our communities. Where is the plan to reduce the danger of this happening? We need to conduct regular and extensive testing of Bahamians who work with or near visitors. Testing is the best tool we have to detect a virus that spreads invisibly. We have heard nothing about the capacity of the testing and when testing will be employed. It appears from the various rumblings that persons are only tested when when symptoms have been exhibited and then tracing takes place. But we are saying it should be more than that. Mr. Speaker, this is more than just a hypothetical matter. Just take what happened last week. Bahamians were outraged as they saw a specially chartered Bahamas Air jet fly in with over 100 Mexican workers to work on construction jobs at Baker's Bay. Right? This, despite the fact that almost every day, and certainly every week now, Bahamians are losing their jobs in droves. And while the feelings of hopelessness, despair, and uncertainty rise among Bahamians, the government couldn't even bring itself to pretend to care about its own people, especially in this time of growing economic crisis. How on earth could any government of the Bahamas sanction those workers coming in to take away jobs that could have and should have been performed by Bahamians? I asked them to have a heart.
Honorable member.
Bahamians built Baker's Bay.
Honorable member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro on a point of order.
Speaker, leading it out. The honorable member for Cat Island states that the Bahamian government, in approving the work permit, do not care about Bahamians. Baker's Bay is not a recent iteration, Mr. Speaker. After the passing of Hurricane Dorian, the good member for Cat Island, who was very well familiar with Baker's Bay, everything about Baker's Bay, is fully aware that it was totally destroyed. Baker's Bay indicated that it could rebuild in a year to a year and a half to pre-Hurricane Dorian standards, and that it required, Mr. Speaker, I'm elucidating something that he said. The pre-Hurricane Dorian standards, Mr. Speaker, the pre-Hurricane Dorian standards. The overture was made last year, long before COVID-19. And Mr. Speaker, why say?
Speed it up, honorable member.
It was made long before COVID-19. COVID-19 caused us to shut down the borders. A strategic analysis was done to ensure that only persons who are in the best interest of the project and who have certain skills were brought in. Cat Island understands the process. Cat Island understands, like I've explained to the person, if an investor does something, he should be able to come, his wife and his children should be able to come. I'm not shocked by anything he does because he seems to hang around bathrooms a lot nowadays to say, but Mr. Speaker, he knows that the intention is to bring this project up, which is an independent project to get Bahamians working. And we put out a comprehensive statement on it. First, Mr. Speaker, it was 500.
Honorable member.
Then it was 300. Then it was nobody was tested.
You've made your point.
To hear Cat Island say what he says, I'm not disappointed. I expect this from him.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker. Speaker, that is my view. What I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, it is recognized that Bahamians are not working, right? And we now have an importation of over 100 workers there. And I can say more about that, but I'll not say it now. Right? I can say more about it because I will not say it now. Right? I'll say it now, but I can say more about it because unlike you all, I will go and find out the truth. I spoke with Baker's Bay. I spoke to them. Yeah. So
the chair recognizes honorable member. Just a moment. I think we are at the lunchtime hour. Yeah. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member for Cat Island has another 12 minutes, and so we're going to allow the member for Cat Island to complete his contribution before we break for the luncheon hour. And so I do now move that the business of this House continues beyond 1 p.m. No, we can let you finish now. Second, that Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
Don't we call to come back with some more things?
Honorable member for Cat Island. I'm putting down. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House to extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of this House will extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
You see, I hear what's been said from the seat, so I will not address it. But apart from allowing this 100 workers in, I thought things got worse. This is how it got worse, Mr. Speaker. Because, like many Bahamians, I too became very horrified when neither the chief medical officer nor the head of the COVID-19 task force could say if those workers had been granted certificates saying that they had tested negative for COVID-19. Say very carefully. That's what they didn't know. And they were in the Bahamas at the time. These are the These are the very people.
Just a moment. Honorable member. A point of order, honorable member. It has to be, a point of clarification has to be related to what you spoke when you made your presentation.
Point of order.
Point of order?
Yes. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
He said point of order now.
You're a senior man.
Not at my invitation.
You're an officer.
Honorable member.
I said that is not. That's interrupting.
No. Honorable member. You know, we were going smooth. Let's continue on that track, on that course. I'm the presiding officer. If the member gets up and he said he's raising on a point of clarification, I have the authority as the presiding officer to indicate to him that he can only rise on a point of clarification on a matter that was raised in his speech. And that's what I did.
But you did. No,
right. And so
you also said a point of order.
I'm saying, are you rising on a point of order or a point of clarification? And he said he's now on a point of order.
I said, Alan, that what he always do, I'll wink at him. He's smiling. Mr. Speaker, you know, many people wondered why it was just not a strike to come out and respond. We heard what the medical professionals say. But to come to the Bahamas, you would have, on these times, immigration requires that you have a COVID-19 health certificate and that you have a negative test. And you have to upload that and it's sent to the government. So why would the ministry risk a confrontation when I could just say, this is the information that was sent, it's already being complied with, and you know, here Cat Island says this, he knows the facts, you know. He knows full well. So when he says these things and gives this sort of impression, I realize he's in the arena of theatrics. He's not been to the bathroom. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker. Now, I didn't hear the ruling on whether that was the point of order, Mr. Speaker, or not.
Well, honorable member, if the chair doesn't indicate that the point of order was not well taken, then we proceed. That has been the pattern. That has been my pattern. I indicate whether the point was well taken or not well taken. If I don't say it was not well taken.
No, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. What horrified me, and I repeat it, is that those who ought to have known whether those persons who came in here were COVID-free or not, did not know. And so the question is, who would have certified them to come in here as they did, right? So Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, what is also worrying, and what we ought to be concerned about as well, you know, European countries, you know, also opened their borders to international travelers last week, as we did. But I note that travelers from the United States were banned. Even some states within the U.S. are requiring fellow citizens coming from hotspots to quarantine when they arrive for 14 days. So we want to hear what we are doing, right? So you know, and so, Mr. Speaker, whilst the cases are surging in the United States, what I want us to know is we need to reopen, but we have to do it right. And we have to do it smart. Right? See, unlike previous resolutions to extend the emergency orders, this present resolution is in fact to debate an entirely new mandate. As we all now know, the government's own negligence in allowing the previous orders to lapse required a new proclamation of emergency last Monday night from the Governor General. The whole process was a total farce. And here's why I said it would be laughable if we were not so serious. And the rot extends from the Prime Minister right down through the Attorney General and to government ministers. That's where the cabinet came in. Eh? Someone asked where the cabinet was. This is where the cabinet is. And yet the government doesn't miss an opportunity to try to blame the opposition for their own failures and incompetence. It's time for the government to grow up. The country is hurting, and we need leaders who can help the Bahamian people. The government's failure to follow the constitutional rules regarding the extension of emergency orders is a failure of the highest order. Yeah, and Thomas Bingham would have said it to you when you read your book just now. This is how insulting. How insulting. I appeared before him if you want to know. I appeared before him at least 3 times, if you want to know. In seeking to deprive Bahamians of their fundamental right of liberty and their guaranteed rights of freedom of movement, the government should be taking the greatest care to follow the law. By being forced to have issued a new proclamation in these new circumstances, the competent authority, the Prime Minister, exposes himself to legal jeopardy. A week last Sunday, the Prime Minister said, boasting, like a number of other countries, we are reopening because we have been successful in arresting the community spread of COVID-19 in the Bahamas. But because of his incompetence in forgetting to have the House actually vote on extending the previous emergency orders, just one day later, the Prime Minister made representations to the Governor General such that His Excellency issued a new proclamation saying, I'm satisfied that due to the presence of COVID-19 in the Bahamas, a state of emergency exists in the Bahamas. The Prime Minister said, we have been successful in arresting the community spread. The next day, the Governor General is saying, it's still present. No virus on Sunday, no new cases on Monday, and yet a new state of emergency exists on Monday. I'm not going to judge. I will not judge it, but it does raise some serious legal issues to be resolved. And because all these things can't be true. And then the day before yesterday, the Attorney General struck again and was unable to say whether he had properly laid the proclamation in the Senate within the time limit prescribed by the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, You know, the biggest threat right now to the Bahamians is the epidemic of incompetence, which is running right throughout this government. That's what we should be concerned about. The Prime Minister is clearly enjoying his powers. You saw him here today. So I'm here. I'm the emergency
Honorable
orders.
member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town. Are you on a...
Mr. Speaker, we cannot leave that on the record for Cat Island.
You're on a point of
And I
order?
do ask that the member for Cat Island withdraw the comment that the Attorney General was unaware as to whether or not he had laid the emergency proclamation. It is quite clear from the process of the events that it was the leader of opposition business in the House of Assembly who inquired. We were always aware that the Attorney General had laid the documents in the Senate, and as is stated by the letter from the Clerk of the House. And so we do ask that the member for Cat Island simply withdraws the reference to the Attorney General in that regard, and rightfully states that it was his member who was obviously confused.
Let me just borrow the Attorney General, when he went into Parliament on Monday, he said, out of abundance of caution and to avoid any doubt, I'm going to lay this. No question was asked of him. The Latin for that is ex abuntiae quatella, right? Ex abuntia quatella. Got it? All right. Right? So he did not know that he had laid it. That's why he went back to do it. After he did that, after his act, the question was raised. Not before. In fact, if he didn't raise it, the matter would never come up. Or is it? Right, that's it, right? And so, Mr. Speaker, I watched the Prime Minister here today. Large and in charge, full of courage. Enjoying this power that he has. But let me tell you something, locking up homeless people, that's not a sign of courage. Stopping Bahamians going to the beach, that's not a sign of courage. Not standing up for Bahamian workers, that's not a sign of courage. That's not a sign of courage at all. And having dozens of heavily armed police officers to send on Bay Street just because he fears that the Bahamian people will turn out to support an honorable member of this people's parliament. That ain't no sign of courage. And so at the beginning,
honorable member,
beginning of this,
the chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The good member for Cat Island just suggested that the Prime Minister, the competent authority, sent police officers to Bay Street. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And yes, he did. He did. And I'm asking him to withdraw that because there is no evidence that the Prime Minister or his office had anything to do with any officers. As a matter of fact, the minister came here for national security, and even he indicated that it was a decision made by the commissioner and his executive team. So I would like for him to withdraw the suggestion that the Prime Minister had anything to do with that.
Honorable member for Cat Island from Queens, Salvador.
Yeah.
Are you able to substantiate?
No, Mr. Speaker, I never said. Mr. Speaker, first of all, let me just say this. I am not accusing the Prime Minister. I'm not accusing the Prime Minister of sending any police officer on Bay Street. Right? I am not doing so.
So you're withdrawing that statement?
I did not say it, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to tell. I could read back what I said if you want me. But I don't think you. What I'm saying is, I'm not flip-flopping. I did not say it. What I am saying, Mr. Speaker, remember the murder in the Cathedral Syndrome? You ever heard about the murder in the Cathedral Syndrome? When Beckett was murdered, was not slippery. No, when the murder in the Cathedral Syndrome. When King said, who will rid me of this meddlesome priest? And Beckett ran and got killed. Right? So who will rid me of this meddlesome member? and they call the police. They call the police. That's not being courageous.
Honorable
That's
Member
not being.
for Carolina and Rumkey in San Salvador.
Why stop the clock?
Honorable Member, on the point of order that was made.
Yeah, Mr. My clock running on.
Stop the clock.
Yeah, Mr. And then that's a minute just run off. It was 3 when I look at it, it was 3:20 minutes. We'll be explaining the suggestion.
Honorable Member for Carolina and Rumkey in San Salvador.
Yeah.
Based on what I heard you say, and the information that I know personally as a presiding officer who made inquiries when I arrived, when I saw all those police.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Prime Minister did.
All right. Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumkin, Salvador. I will resolve this matter. It's ordered that the reference to the Prime Minister being responsible for bringing the police or authorizing the police to be in Rawson Square on that occasion is expunged from the record.
I was going to withdraw. I was going to withdraw. I was just going to remind you all of King Henry II, who wanted to get rid of this meddlesome priest, right? Meddlesome priest, Becket, who was then martyred in the cathedral. Right? So anyhow, Speaker, at the beginning of these emergency orders, we warned the government of the dangers of overreach. And as you heard today and before, they now choose to play politics and spin that warning for political messaging. Fine, that's okay. Rather than pay attention to the serious underlying legal constitutional issues. If they are serious about wanting to protect the health of the Bahamian people, there's the Quarantine Act, you have the Health Services Act, that give them all the powers they need. You don't need a proclamation of emergency, particularly when you say that you have arrested it, and then the next day you're saying it's still present, right? It is said, the Speaker. I say, see, y'all can make light of these things, but it may have to be determined elsewhere. All I suggest, the negligence and incompetence that we witness here raises wider issues of trust. Right? What else will they get wrong? We know they had a lot of other things wrong. I have a list of them here, but I wouldn't remind them of it. Like the Grand Bahama Lucayan, he bought it, he forget the inventory. When he bought the Lucayan Hotel, he forget to buy it, include the inventory, the golf course and all that. I could talk about that. Oban and right. You said you spend the money. You say to protect the jobs at Grand. Right? And the next thing you know, last week you're laying off the people. You send them home. And fine, so you have Bahama and Atlantis. They're laying off people. They have all kinds of concessions that comes from us, the Bahamian people. And I'm not hearing anything from the government as to what they're doing to try to protect these workers. Let me suggest this to you, Speaker. What I'm going to recommend, I can talk about Bamsi too. Yes, that's useful.
Well, let's talk about
right. Speaker, if I could have 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, what I would ask the government to consider to help the workers of this country, I would invite them to consider. I wish them to consider an amendment to the Employment Act, because our frontline workers will require protection. The people, anyone who comes in contact with these the visitors, particularly those from the United States, that in the event they were to contract the virus, that it be considered an industrial accident so that they can get all the emoluments and protection of someone who would fall in that category. So it would just be like someone just sick. They have to take their sick leave and be treated as a person who is absent because they're ill. So they could preserve all their sick leave entitlement, for example, because they'll be contracting this virus because we are permitting people to come in with it. And that'll be a responsibility, I suspect, we ought to give serious consideration to. The frontline workers, taxi drivers, hotel workers, other persons who are going to be exposed to our visitors are at high risk of contracting it. Quite apart, I say, from regularly testing them, we should also put them now in the category to be able to be treated as someone who would have incurred an industrial injury in the event they were to contract the disease. That's why I asked for an amendment. That's why the law has to be amended to make it so. It is. You want me to find it? No. Huh? I therefore propose to this House that we amend. I therefore propose to this House that we amend the provisions of the Employment Act and define the contraction of COVID-19 under these circumstances as an industrial accident. This will at least provide some comfort to those who become infected at work, afford these workers all the benefits and workers' compensation under provisions of the Employment Act and the National Insurance Act. So, Mr. Speaker, this is what a compassionate government will do. This is a compassionate judgment, right? And that's what I invite you all to consider. And so, Mr. Speaker, a lot is at stake. Too much is at stake. And we have made some recommendations. We have our COVID task force has been continuously collaborating with the government task force. And despite what the political rhetoric is here, I know that they have been cooperating and sharing what has been going on. And we are here to continue to collaborate with and assist in crafting plans and initiatives that's going to protect our people. I am deeply concerned that we open the border, but that we open it wisely, with the proper testing and the proper protocols in place to ensure that our workers, our first line defenders, like greasers, have the proper, are protected in a way that we will not have. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, we rest.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you.
Are you on a point of order?
Yes, sir. I didn't want to interrupt the member, but I just wanted to make a statement with respect to the compassion of the government as the member employed us to do. And that is, he made a statement about the government not helping the employees in the tourism sector. And I just wanted to ensure that the record is clear on that as we go to the break, so that the media can have the accurate facts. And that is that the government has implemented a number of relief measures, both for individuals as well as for business entities that would have been affected by the COVID-19 lockdown and the slowdown in business. And that includes the vulnerable class that the member would know very well, as his family would have been involved in that industry, and that's the taxi industry. He would know that all of those persons, taxis, the straw vendors, the hair braiders, the bus drivers, and all of those persons were receiving $200 per week as income replacement as a result of their inability to earn their wages, their normal income. $48 million. Over $40 million. Another $60 million for business support, which went directly to support employment. A total of $120 million, Mr. Speaker, spent for income replacement and business support for employment. So I don't want anyone to be misled, to believe that this government has not done its part in respect to what we can afford, because we are limited by what we can afford. But we have done, I think, a tremendous job. And I'm proud of this government for the support and the willingness to assist our most vulnerable during this particular time when we all are experiencing challenges. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Cat Island.
I heard the member for East Grand Bahama. I'm not questioning what he's saying with the numbers. It's just that I'm hearing people on the ground and they ain't reaching them yet. Case in point, and I'm going to call two witnesses in here to prove it. The member for Southern Shores and the member for Golden Gates. Yesterday, an indigent gentleman was downstairs. He was downstairs. He said he can't get food, and he wanted food. And he said he waited out here. I came in, I met him out here. He was standing out there. When I was leaving, he was still here. And as I left the office downstairs that I prepared for you all over there, I met him here again. I met him there again. He told me, he called me crying. He said, I was out here, Mr. Davis, you saw me this morning. I said, yes. He said, I spoke with Mr. Campbell. I tell him they stopped giving me food. I say, Mr. Campbell say he's busy. Sorry. He said, Mr. Campbell said, well, yeah, he said, Mr. Campbell told him that he has to apply online. He said he told you, with what? He said he need a smartphone. He showed me his bubbler. He said, I don't have a smartphone and I don't know how to use it. Hold on, let me just finish it. He said, and then you then told him, I think he said you told him to speak to Mr. Folks. Where you going? Oh, yeah. And then he said he went to Mr. Folks, and Mr. Folks took his number and said he'll get back to him. But he did not feel. Oh, that's why he was complaining and he was crying. That's what I'm saying, right? But the question though is the question he had, he said that many like him, why does he have to apply online to get food? He don't know how to do it. Come here to see the minister to do that. That's what that's the complaint he's making. And there's people like that who are not feeling what you all say you all doing.
The chair recognizes honourable members.
Thank you.
Trying to recognize this member for Southern Shores.
I respond because the good member from Cat Island saw fit to invite me into this with incorrect facts. So let me help the good member for Cat Island and all who are listening. As I was leaving after the luncheon break yesterday, on Monday, the gentleman was downstairs. He approached me. I entertained his concern. And let me speak. I asked him to speak to my driver not the good member for Golden Gates, my driver, and I instructed the driver, Corporal Roll, to call the secretary at the office and arrange for him to get an emergency voucher. Let me say to Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador, and all who are within the sound of my voice, I have been the Minister of Social Services since July 5th, 2018. To date, I cannot say what is the color of one of those vouchers or coupons. Many are of the opinion that I have them in my pocket and I travel with them when I'm able to issue them. That is not the case. I said nothing to the good gentleman about applying online. That is not the fact. I said it so just because he told you, you feel satisfied, don't make it true. So I'm now saying to you what happened. First hand, there was a second hand. First hand. You know the difference between first hand and second hand evidence, eh? Yes. First hand, I said to him, my driver will call the secretary. She will make some arrangement. But he did not wish to leave because he was of the opinion that I ought to be able to satisfy him right then and there. Unfortunately, as compassionate as I am, that is not the procedure. I do not handle the vouchers. And had he left and followed the instructions, he would have gotten the emergency assistance.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Gates.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I rise because, like the honorable member for Southern Shores, my name too was mentioned by the honorable member for Cat Island. And let me just say, it is so that the gentleman spoke to me yesterday morning when I came in, and I told the gentleman, please give me your name and give me your number. And then he was here when I was leaving yesterday evening. And I told him that I got his name and I got his telephone number. I remember his name and his number well at this moment. At this moment, he gave it to me and I told him I will have it investigated. And I did. I went to the office on the break and I told the people there, I asked them to please investigate this matter to find out what is the situation. Why is it that this gentleman has not gotten any assistance? And they said that they were going to get right on it. And they gave me some information later on, but I don't want to share that information here because it is particulars as to the man's personal situation. But the reality of it is, it was acted upon immediately. Immediately. And you know, Mr. Speaker, it really concerns me because we hear this narrative that this government does not care. And that's what this is about. This is this narrative, we don't care, we have no compassion, and this is what they do. This is what they do. But that gentleman, I looked him in his eye. I looked him in his eye. I got his name. I got his phone number, and I did not write it down. I committed it to memory. I have it now. And I went back to the office and I said, we need to follow up with this matter. And they assured me, and they came back and said, let me tell you what we have found. But I don't want to say that here because we're going to get it resolved and the gentleman's going to get sorted out. And that is what we always do.
Honorable members, we don't want to back and forth.
That is no.
Suffering. Right, suffering.
Listen, Speaker, you see,
honorable members, honorable members.
Speaker, I need no brownie points. I met a hungry Bahamian who was out there all day.
Honorable members.
I can tell you
honorable members.
I will not tell you what I do.
Honorable members.
Right? But Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying...
members, the chair has said enough on that matter.
Speaker.
Honorable members.
No. Mr. I am telling you, Bahamians are hungry, and those are the people who are not... I'm happy that you all responded.
Honorable members. The chair has said enough on that matter. The allegations were made.
Why Bahamians have to apply online?
The minister has made his point. Let us proceed. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House suspends until 3:30 this afternoon. The Senate has to meet at 3 o'clock, but we will start the House at 3:30 sharp. 3:30 sharp.
Is there a
Shall
second?
start the House.
I second that, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House do suspend until 3:30 p.m. sharp. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. It's ordered that the business of this House stand suspended until 3:30 p.m. sharp this afternoon.